Well, I'm not a career politician. I'm a problem solver. Right? I don't want to have to spend 25 years getting to this point where you've kind of lost vision in maybe your soul.
All right. Welcome to the show, Katrina Christiansen. How's it going?
I'm doing really well, John. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for coming on the show. I know it's election year, so things are just getting started, and I'm sure you're plenty busy right now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for Senate in North Dakota?
Well, John, I really thank you for having me. I'm excited to be running for U.S. Senate here in North Dakota. I think that North Dakotans are very skeptical of Washington, D.C. right now. They know the system isn't working. They know that Washington is broken. And, when Trump is talking about draining the swamp, the American people are drawn to that because they understand it. Now, whether or not he can actually do that is a separate discussion. But I'm running for U.S. Senate to represent the people's interests. I am a mother of three. I am from a working class family. Actually, my dad and his brother lost the farm before I was born. And, we grew up poor. I know what it's like to live off of government programs. Like I got my shots through WIC. I went to Head Start. I had free and reduced lunch when I was growing up. Like I did not have a rich upbringing. And somehow I got really lucky. I did have to study hard, but I managed to climb my way up into the middle class. And I think that, that luck part is a factor. And I think even now we see that it's harder for people to work their way into the middle class. I think people are really frustrated by economic inequality in this nation, in our state of North Dakota. And it doesn't need to be that way. And that's why I want to go to Washington, D.C. I think North Dakotans, once you can overcome the D label behind your name, they don't care about that. They care about finding childcare. They care about being able to find senior living conditions for their parents that are safe and that are nearby. They care about being able to afford a home and have a job and, afford life-saving drugs like insulin. And so I think that it's important that when we talk about this year's election, we talk about the issues that people really care about. And I think the thing that my opponent is really good at is talking about issues that get people animated and avoiding problem solving. And, I'm an engineer. I graduated valedictorian in my high school class, went to the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, got a degree in biosystems engineering, got my master's in engineering, worked as a plant engineer, crawled into every single piece of equipment that I could fit into. I really learned a lot. It was a very humbling experience. Went back and got my PhD in agricultural engineering. I love plants. I love solving problems. It's something that really motivates me. I worked for Cargill, the world's largest privately held company. I have 3 patents. 2 of them were with Cargill, and then I worked for a startup. So I have lots of experience with just a variety of problem solving areas. And, I was laid off by Cargill. I was laid off by my startup. So I understand economic insecurity in a way that I think our current representatives don't. And so that's really what I want to bring to Washington, D.C. is somebody who's representing the people's interess.
Awesome. And coming from my background, I grew up in California, all over California, really poor as well. And I grew up on all the government programs. And one of the things that I've constantly kind of stood up for in California is the social safety nets that have been provided. A lot of people outside of California look at, the taxes we pay. They look at the programs that we have, and they say, we're making this homeless problem bigger. We're making it so that way people can kind of sit on their duff and not do any work. And coming from where I come from, I can really tell you that that's not what's going on. We have, obviously this is where the term welfare queens came from, is California and such is you're just giving these women money to have as many children as they want. And, Gavin Newsom is just allowing this to happen. And really, when you actually spend some time in California getting to know California, you realize that, yeah, we do pay a lot of taxes. My son is high functioning autistic, and he has a very good IEP program, and that IEP program is paid for by my taxes. I actually am really proud of coming from where I came from. Just like you said, I worked really hard. I worked my way into the middle class. I now own a home, something that I never thought that I would do, something that people would tell you in California you can't do. Uh, but
Congratulations. I don't
thank
own
you.
my home. I'm close,
Oh,
but I don't own it.
yeah. So, I think that more and more in these conversations I'm having with politicians, I'm finding myself having better conversations with people like yourself, like John Padora, where you're people that have a background that has life experience that really has driven you to do the things that you're doing. And when you talk about Donald Trump wanting to drain the swamp, as he says, first of all, I believe Donald Trump is the swamp. He is very much a huge part of the reason that there is a swamp. And when he had, the presidential elect, he did nothing but put other people back in the place. Sure, he let go some people, and he just replaced them with Goldman Sachs, with big oil, with all the same people that were pretty much there already. Just now, these ones were his friends instead. And I mean, not to mention all the nepotism, putting his family into places that now apparently he's trying to do with the RNC, and he's trying to put his daughter-in-law in charge, and it's
Yeah,
really crazy.
patronage. Yes,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
It's very, yeah. And that's, I was critical of that comment because it was it's a little bit tongue in cheek in the sense that there is a lot of the patronage, right? The spoils
Mm-hmm.
system is definitely a component to the way that he operates. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I do really believe that people are frustrated by
Mm-hmm.
partisan paralysis or people pursuing interests that are they're self-interest. They're not the people's interests. I have a friend here in North Dakota. He's a Republican. I have more than one friend, but this one, he was talking about how he feels like his vote has been sold to the highest bidder, and
Mm-hmm.
they sent him, Senator Cramer, to Washington to represent their interests, but they really don't. And I think what we're seeing with a lot of leaders in Washington D.C. is they are not willing to take risks. They have to toe the party line. They're very afraid of backlash or losing endorsements or losing fat checks from corporate political lobbies or power brokers. And so as a result, you don't have people that are leading with experience of like what it is like to live in a community, where people are struggling, where people don't have access to resources that they need. And so I hope to bring that leadership and that perspective.
Yeah, and as far as North Dakota goes, you do have a pretty good history of Democratic leadership. As I think you have two Democrats that had almost 20 to 30 year tenures with the Senate, I believe.
So,
And
oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, yes. So actually, the seat that I'm running for, that Senator Cramer won in 2018, was actually held by a Democrat for nearly 60 years.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
And it does seem like there's a little bit of obviously a diversity issue, as there is in almost all of politics nowadays. I mean, we're getting better, but North Dakota politics, I mean, when you go through the Wikipedia, you see that the majority of people that have been elected are white men. And, North Dakota obviously has a overwhelmingly white population, but there's a lot of women in North Dakota that I'm sure need, or want representation as well. So do you feel like it not only is it an uphill battle just because you're a Democrat? I like what you said earlier about voters, once you get past that D, that they do want to vote for you as well. But do you think also that maybe in North Dakota, being a woman as well, is that adding to how hard it is, the obstacles to become a Senate in a senator in North Dakota?
So I think that I don't view this Senate race as an uphill battle because when we look at that long history of North Dakotans voting for people who will represent their interests, I think is that gets me going every morning. So North Dakota is also really small. it's a very relational state. So I have this story I would like to tell if you wouldn't mind. So
Oh, go
when
for it.
I launched my campaign in October, we said we were going to do a launch tour a couple weeks later, and so my campaign manager came out from DC, and he went with me from where I'm like kind of like in the middle. Fargo, everybody considers this Western North Dakota once you're like west of Fargo. But we went from my town to Fargo to Grand Forks, which is the city that flooded in '97. It's quite famous. And then we were leaving Grand Forks and we were going to this other city, Minot. Actually, I think there's a serial killer from Minot. But anyway, so in between there's this really tiny town called Michigan, North Dakota. And my campaign manager and I stopped, and we were going to get gas there, and it was a Sunday, and it was snowy and icy, and this truck pulled up, and this guy got out, and he was in duck hunting gear, and he was telling us, "Oh, the gas station's not open. You can't pump." And I was like, "Oh, that kind of sucks." I'm trying to figure out in my head where's the next small town with a gas station, but my campaign manager had said, if you're going to win this election, Katrina, you're going to have to introduce yourself to everybody that you possibly can. And so I was like, okay, I got to show this kid I can do this, you know? And so I went over to the duck hunter and I said, "Hi, I'm Katrina Christiansen. I'm running for U.S. Senate." And he said, "What party?" And I said, "I'm a Democrat." And he threw his hands up, stuck his hands in his coveralls and wasn't going to shake my hand. And I was like, "Oh my God, this isn't good." And then I just started to talk to him about what he did in Michigan. And it turns out that he's a farmer. And I was able to talk to him about crops and, you know, what do you grow? Because I'm an ag engineer. And, oh, you grow barley. And so I was able to talk to him about yields and protein content and all this stuff, right? And so you just kind of like back him down from that position. And before I knew it, he was talking about corrupt politicians, career politicians. He was very frustrated. And he said I should run for the Department of Public Instruction, which is like essentially in charge of our like, you know, elementary and high school education in North Dakota. And I said, "Well, I'm not a career politician. I'm a problem solver, right? I don't want to have to spend 25 years getting to this point where you've kind of lost vision and maybe your soul." And so he kind of looked at me and he was like, "Huh." And then by the end of it, he said he wished me luck and he shook my hand. And, you know, I kind of joke that I have 2 votes in Michigan, North Dakota, but it takes that kind of interaction to disarm the D in this day and age. And one thing to think about is the people that voted for Trump, you know, in 2016 and in 2020 were also the people that voted for Bush and also voted for Mitt Romney and Heidi Heitkamp. And so they're not fans of career politicians. They're not fans of people taking PAC money. And I think it's really important that people are heard and that we listen to them. And when you do that with people, it helps. Like they're like, oh, you're not a scary monster. And I just want to help those people. And so that's the sort of work that it's going to take to win this seat. Whether or not I don't actually think that being a woman is as big of a hurdle here in North Dakota because we've had 2 female senators. Senator Burdick obviously was nominated to finish serving her husband's term, but those things have been already crossed. I think it's much harder to elect a female governor here, though.
Okay. Yeah, and that's great to hear because I really do feel, you know, right now where we're at with the kind of the rhetoric, the polarization of politics and everything seems really extreme. And I think that unfortunately we got here because people were tired of career politicians. I think that people looked at Donald Trump in 2016 as being he's different. You know, I don't agree with the things they said. I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, but I understood why people did, why they thought they were going to make a change, why saying things like, you know, he says the right things, not anymore, but he was for like 2 seconds. You know, he was saying, we're going to bring back coal jobs. We're gonna, we're gonna drain the swamp. We're gonna get, these career politicians out of politics. These are all things that I don't think he actually believed he was gonna do, but I think he knew people wanted to hear that, and that's what he's
Yeah.
really good at. He is very much a charismatic cult leader, in my opinion. And I think that he knows how to say things in a way that is very, it makes people like myself, like yourself, that come from a background of hard work, feel like they're being heard and that somebody's going to do something about something that makes a difference to them. Now, once you actually try to, see, is the proof in the pudding? Is he actually doing these things? Well, that's where, between 2016 and 2020, I never had any love for him really, but I felt out of any type of love that would have been there because I didn't see the actions. All I saw was kind of a narcissistic, self-involved person that really just wanted to consolidate power for himself and didn't really care about anything other than being told that he was, the greatest president of all time, and that obviously just doesn't appeal to me. So when I hear you say that you're out there, you're shaking hands, and you're doing this thing that I think every politician should be doing, and that is getting to know people and finding out what they actually care about and what's going to make their lives better, and reaching across the aisle, which is something that is like almost foreign now. I mean, I've shared videos of Obama being defended by McCain and gotten these horrible comments from people where they're like, I hate McCain too. Like Obama's, this, and also McCain was a traitor. And I'm like, oh my God, my family is military, like, I'm like, that's some of the worst, like, rhetoric that a person could possibly have. And it seems to be super prevalent on a certain fringe portion of the right now. So when I hear you say that you're talking to Republicans, that you're shaking hands, that you're trying to, get away from that divide and kind of talk about things that you guys have in common, I think that's incredibly important for where we're at as the United States right now. We need to start talking to each other more about what we have in common and a lot less about what divides us. It's really, we're at this point right now in America where we can't stop talking about what we don't like about each other. So, as
Hmm.
far as that goes, Kevin Cramer has said some very strange stuff in his tenure. One of the things, he made a comment about Nancy Pelosi and dressing all in white when in solidarity with Hillary Clinton. He made a very poor comment about that. And he even at one point chose to tweet on, I believe it was a comment in somebody's message, that she was retarded. His words, not mine. And then he kind of blamed that on the fact that he had, fat fingered it and his phone autocorrected. My phone doesn't autocorrect to that word. I don't know. His phone. But I think that he is one of these people that continues to create this divide. As you were saying, he's the type of guy that goes to Washington. He has money in his pocket. He has people that are asking him to, kind of continue this divide because it's very important for a person like him to keep that office by doing so. Do you feel that he's also helping to create that divide, or do you feel like Senator Kramer will, will he do anything to help heal it, or do you think he's just going to be divisive?
So I think that one of Kevin's strengths, but is also his weakness, is that he's really great at identifying problems
Mm,
and complaining about them and assigning blame. And that's where his job stops. Like
mm,
if you watched any of his, news interviews in the last 2 weeks, he was very art he would complain about, oh, I can't vote for this because of that, and the Senate's the most deliberative body, but we couldn't do this. And there is always this is the problem. These people are responsible. That's it. That's where he stops. And he doesn't know how to do the really hard work of, like you had said, reaching across the aisle and building support for things that are something that he's brought forward, or for amending things to improve the bills that he's been complaining about. I think that that's his record. Kevin has been in office for over 30 years, I believe, or at least in like government for 30 years. And he was, appointed to his first position. And so When people are asked, we've asked on social media and when we were on our launch tour, what has Kevin Cramer done for you? The response is often silence. And I think that that's a lot more telling than the crappy stuff that he does. I mean, like you had pointed out. But he also has done some really terrible things. Like he voted against capping insulin for seniors at $35 and for all Americans at $35. He's voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act numerous times. Numerous times. And there are over 70,000 people in the state of North Dakota that get health care through the exchange program. We expanded Medicaid in North Dakota. There are many people, many children that benefit from those sorts of programs. And that to me speaks more to his character than the social media things. I just don't think he's a good leader. I got a mailer in 2018. I took pictures of them. I got 2 mailers, and he said number one thing that he was going to do was secure the border. That's what he said he would do. He didn't do it.
Here we are.
He didn't do it.
Yeah.
He didn't do it. And he said he wouldn't support the border bill. He had a bunch of little things that he found problems with and couldn't figure out a way to fix them. So the reality is a politician never wants to solve a problem because it gives them one less thing to fundraise off of and complain about.
Yeah,
that's him.
And that's so true. That is, unfortunately, when you have your job security wrapped around having these issues like the border crisis, or the border issue is really what it is, you tend to have people that don't really have any reason to fix things. In fact, if you want to be honest, when you look at the Freedom Caucus, the far right of politics right now, when you talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene, you talk about Lauren Boebert or Matt Gaetz, those guys actually have ran on breaking government. On that government is broken and it must be burnt to the ground and restarted, which is an absolutely ridiculous thing to say. But their idea that you get in and everything in government is so bad, so broken that you can't do anything about it, you just have to kind of get rid of all of it and start over, is just, I mean, at that point, what gets you removed from your job? If everything continues to fail, then you are right. And if things get fixed, then you're wrong. So the only way you get removed from your job is actually if things go good, because then people don't have a need for you. So I think that what you see is like self-fulfilling prophecy. You put somebody, in my opinion, like Lauren Boebert or MTG, that don't really have the chops to be in those offices or the experience or the education to do the job correctly. And then things start failing and they can go, well, yeah, of course it's failing. I told you the government's broken. That's why it's failing. It's not me. You need me in here, because if you don't have me in here, you don't have representation, because these guys act like everything's okay. So you kind of have to find somewhere. There has to be a middle ground there where we all agree that there are things in government that do need to be fixed, some very important things, but also having the opinion that I like what you just said about Kevin, because it harkens back to an older school type of politics. Where, well, you watch older debates. If you go on YouTube, you can look up what went wrong with debates. And older debates constantly had both presidents sitting there looking at each other and going, hey, I don't like, or I'm sorry, candidates saying, you know what, I don't love so-and-so, but you know what? He's done a lot of good for this country. I don't agree with all of his policies, but he's done a lot of good for this country. And we've gotten so far away from that your answer with what you said about Kevin Cramer and about, hey, these are actually the things that he's doing wrong. And instead of making these hyperbolic statements that are extravagant and kind of just like bombastic, you're actually getting to the core of what is wrong. And this is something that when we talk about Trump is very also apparent, is he says, this is what's wrong with America, never has a plan to fix it. Affordable Care Act, you were just talking about how he had voted to repeal that. I believe it's 5 times he's voted to repeal it. Never has offered a solution. Same thing for Trump. Trump has offered over and over again to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, has never once said what he's going to replace it with. oh, the free market will take care of that. No, it won't. We've already been there. We've already seen that. But speaking of things that people have voted against, obviously Roe v. Wade is going to be a huge part of this election cycle. It was a huge part of the midterm cycle. And to be honest, if we want to talk about why you saw these, big losses during the midterms, we can point towards Roe v. Wade and women's rights. What's your stance on the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade? And if elected, what would you do to ensure women's right to choice in North Dakota?
Well, I think the Supreme Court made a mistake. I support a woman's right to choose, full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Cramer supports a federal abortion ban, and I would vote to codify abortion rights because it's healthcare. And I would support the Women's Health Protection Act. And I think that, if I may, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, I had a lot of concerns about how it was going to affect people in medical emergencies. And everybody no, it won't affect you. It won't affect you. That's not true. We've seen in Oklahoma and in Texas and Florida and Kentucky and Ohio, you look at it, there have been women who have been in medical crises who have been denied the care that they need. Bad things happen to good people and they need medical care. And Roe v. Wade upset their ability to access that care when they needed it. There's this case that my dad was diagnosed with cancer in April of 23. No, it's okay. He's fine. Like, we're very fortunate. He just gets a shot a month. But it was a very, like, for 2 months, I was like in just this state of anxiety because I was like really worried about my dad dying and dealing with that. And then, there's that story of that woman in Oklahoma who had the molar pregnancy, and like she had cancerous tissue in her body that the state denied her care for. And I think like it's uncomfortable to talk about, but this is what happens when those protections are removed. People are forced to carry cancerous tissue across state lines to get it removed. Like that is America? I don't think so. And so I do think it's really important that we talk about it in these stark real terms because that's the reality now. So it's sad.
Yeah, I'm in talks with, I believe her name's Allie Phillips, and she's running for, I think, Congress in Tennessee, and she's running because of that
Oh,
as well. Yeah, I'm
yes,
trying
she
to
was
get her on the
denied.
show.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's, I mean, it's unfortunate that she was denied care, but I'm glad that she's decided to take action. I
yeah, I
read that
believe she's running
story.
for Congress. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
of course you had Kate Cox in Texas, and I said years ago. So when Roe v. Wade was when they first started talking about overturning Roe v. Wade, I like to educate myself. That's what these podcasts are for. I said, okay, well, I'm pro-choice, but why am I pro-choice? Like, can I really back that up with anything other than just saying, well, it's a woman's, choice to do with her body what she wants? Do I have other reasons? And so I did a lot of research. I spent, 2, 3 weeks, a month looking into all these different things that were going on with, my beliefs as far as being pro-choice went. And some of the places I got to were, okay, well, even if you want to say you're pro-life, even if you come to me and say you're 100% sure life begins at conception, you know that this is true, you can prove that this is true, what do you do in these certain situations where a woman has a miscarriage when she's at home? What do you punish that woman? Like, how do you decide that what she did was an accident versus, she did it on purpose? And the crazy thing is during that research, I was asking the question, well, will people be put on trial for that? And during that, I found out that over the past decade, 1,200 women have been put on trial for those things. And that was before Roe v. Wade was overturned, and a lot of those were due to drug use and stuff. But even then, you have to ask yourself, where do we draw these lines? Where are we going to become the arbiters of these women's fate, when it comes to some very unfortunate circumstances that at some points, I believe with Allie and both with Kate Cox, that it was unviable and were very much their life was being put in jeopardy to carry the child to full term, which once again is unviable. So there wouldn't have been a child. And so when you look at what happened with Roe v. Wade, it almost seems like, as far as the right goes, even women on the right are getting upset about that. They're saying, hey, what happens if this is my daughter? What happens if this is my sister? What happens if this is me? And this is a place that, like you said, it's very uncomfortable to talk about, especially as a male. Let me be honest with you. It's very hard for me to feel that I have, a real voice in this conversation, as I'm not the person that's going to be making these, medical decisions.
But you can be an ally. So
Yeah,
I think, yeah, yeah. I certainly don't want to have to drive my daughter 4 hours if she's had, the
yeah,
unfortunate membrane rupture at 16 weeks and she could die of sepsis. Like that, to me, that's like
yeah.
terrible, terrifying.
Yeah, and I have a
So
daughter. I have a 13-year-old daughter, so
yeah, I don't
I,
want to
I
do
feel
that.
you.
Like I have a 12-year-old, so we're very similar.
Yeah,
Swifty,
yeah,
Olivia Rodrigo. Yeah, we could jam
yeah,
out here.
yeah.
So, but I
So
think
it
I
is.
think
It's huge.
and it will only become more magnified. So,
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that even I think with the Kate Cox one, it was talked about that she couldn't return to Texas because she could be prosecuted for going outside of Texas to have the abortion. I don't know that that's 100% true, but it was talked about, and that's one of the things. I called it my 5 conundrums, and I came up with the 5 different big questions I had for myself. And conundrum is one of my favorite words. A question that is extremely difficult to answer. And when I'm talking to pro-life people, a lot of times I say that. I go, hey, I'm not coming at you from this point of view that I know the answer. I'm saying that when we're in a place where we don't know 100% for certain what the answer is, choice is almost always going to be the default answer. We're always going to want to go to, let's let people decide what's best for them, and this is, like I said, my 5 conundrums. One of them was punishment. What do you do? What if your mom drives you 4 hours to get an abortion? Do you now punish the mother like you would punish an accomplice to a murder? Would you, do you, anybody that talked to you and helped you schedule the appointment, do you start punishing those people? It's 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 really funny because the right wing, in my opinion, is the party of the slippery slope. They're constantly living on a slippery slope in which they're telling you, if we put in this law, it's going to lead to this, this, and this. And yet they were completely willing to just slide right down this one into what I believe is probably the worst possible place for them right now. So,
though I do think if I just there were states following the the overturn to codify that as healthcare. And so, I mean, it's in their constitution. So women have healthcare needs. Sorry, and it's in some states' constitutions. So if there's a silver lining, I guess that's it. So
once again, everybody who's moving out of California, it's time to come back. So speaking of the issues, there's obviously, when you talk about traditional politics, you're talking about, certain hotbed issues. We have a real issue with gun violence in this country. I was just talking about Tennessee. Obviously, that was, a couple of years ago with the Tennessee Three, with Gloria Johnson, Justin Jones, and Justin Parsons standing up for those kids that were that died in the mass shooting in Tennessee. The rest of the world doesn't seem to be struggling with this. Cramer in 2016 criticized proposed gun control legislation after the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting, saying the problem isn't the U.S. Constitution, the problem is Islamic terrorism. In that specific instance, Omar Mateen did claim affiliation with the Islamic State, just to be clear. However, overwhelmingly, mass shooters in America are white males. It's not even close. I think it's 97%. We just had that shooting, I think, over the weekend at the Joel Osteen Church, and it was a woman, and I think women are something less than 3% over the last 20 years. What do you think is behind what I would say is a uniquely American issue? Is it guns? Is it mental health? Is it religious extremism, as Kevin Cramer is pointing to? or is it something
Um,
different?
I'm not a sociologist, so I'll be honest in that regard, but I am a parent. It is something that I think about when I drop my 7-year old off every day at school. And I think, oh, God, I hope there's not a school shooter today, you know? And of course, I have a high schooler and a middle schooler. So, and I just hope that their protocols work, right? But I want to be clear and that, you know, like I support the basic right to own guns. Like we own guns. I actually have my great grandfather's bolt action 410 that I've shot before. We have guns for hunting. That is it. Um, and I understand that, you know, Americans have a relationship with guns. But I also think that a majority of Americans support a minimum standard like background checks and red flag laws. And those are easy. Those are like easy wins. Like really. And so you know, I think that on the flip side of that, right, we have um partisan politics that kind of really muddle the waters here. But the flip side of that is, oh well, it's not guns, it's mental health. But if you say that, then you actually need to respond to that with impactful, workable solutions. So, like in North Dakota, there are 53 counties. I think 28 of them do not have mental health professionals. Well, that's just ridiculous. Like, you can't actually expect that that's like that. Okay, it's mental health, and then fix it by not doing anything when you obviously have this huge gap. Like, it is really difficult to find mental health services in North Dakota. Like, there's a whole district, District 28, in our state that doesn't have, it's like 5 counties, no mental health professionals, none, zero. How impractical a platitude is that when you look at the reality of your state? Again, if you don't understand the landscape, the mental health care crisis that's in North Dakota, and then you speak to that as the solution for a very serious problem. Let's not be glib about this. People have died. A lot of people have died in really heinous ways. And so I look, we can deal with our mental health care crisis, but only if we invest in the resources and the infrastructure and the access and the idea that continuity of care is something that is kind of a reality in mental health care. So a lot of people have chronic conditions, and so you have to adjust to that idea that it's not like strep throat, right? You don't take a round of antibiotics and you're done. This is something that people will struggle with probably for the rest of their life, and that's okay as long as they don't harm anybody and we keep everybody okay. And so I feel like partisanship has made finding a workable solution here problematic because of the outrage like we were already talking about.
Yeah, the slippery slope there. I think that at least the opponents of gun control on the right will constantly remind people, well, once they take away your guns because your mental health is bad, next is this, and it's next is this, and next is, and it's living on that slippery slope. And once again, we go back to what you're saying about Cramer and what I was saying about Trump, and is that they, oh, okay, it's a mental health issue, but we're not going to do anything about that either. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, we've talked ad nauseum in this country about healthcare. You know, constantly. I mean, the Affordable Care Act came through, and it's gotten nothing but criticism from the right. Even though more and more people every year are taking advantage of it, and at this point, it's practically codified itself. There's not really a sane way of removing the Affordable Care Act at this
I
point. In
think
fact, it's
common sense gun laws can protect
mhm.
people. And I think that's, you know, I think you mentioned something about, oh, they're going to take away your guns. I think in Wyoming, which has a very serious suicide problem, I think there was a story about how gun uh, shops will let people go and lock up their guns. And so if they need to, if they are having I forget the
A
exact.
crisis.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, the industry in Wyoming is recognizing, hey, we need to do something about mental health care. So,
Yeah, and one of the things Bernie Sanders said a while back that I thought was great was he said mental health is health. That should be a part of the Affordable Care Act. This is where I'm going with that. Was like we need to move mental health into the main sphere of healthcare, and we need to kind of get away from this pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Everybody just needs to be tougher. It's kind of like that older crowd, even my crowd, my generation's crowd, of like this generation is so much softer. It's like there's a lot more of different types of stress that are going on in this day and age than there was 20 years ago. And even then, specifically, men weren't talking about their mental health. We really need to look at mental health as health care, and we need to stop stigmatizing people speaking out about it and saying that they have these problems. When you say that about Wyoming, that's so good to hear. That's such a common sense thing to say, and people will go, oh, well, who would turn in their guns? Who would do something like that? Well, somebody having a mental health crisis. That's who. Somebody that is very worried about the fact that they might take their own life and leave two kids or a wife with, all these problems. They need that access, and we need to be able to provide that for them. I think when we talk about red flag laws, I think that it just makes sense to say that a person that is currently being diagnosed with a mental health issue needs to have things put in a safe place for them. And when we talk about domestic violence, I think it's something like, how many is it? It's a woman dies every day. Is there two women that die every day from domestic violence from guns? It's insane. There's another one for you. John Stewart.
I
Yeah.
know that the second leading cause of pregnant women
Mm-hmm.
after car accidents is domestic
It's
violence.
domestic violence, and it almost
Yeah,
always involves
pregnant
a
women.
gun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's just certain things like that. Look, you don't want your guns taken away. Don't abuse your wife. I think that should be a pretty good law. Seems like a pretty good line to draw. And yes, I do agree that there's always an outlier case of someone being accused that wasn't. But at least in my case, if I was accused of it, somebody takes my guns, I feel as though, hey, let me prove my case. Let me show that I'm innocent. Then I get my guns back. Here in California, people may think that we don't own guns, but we own a lot of guns. There's a lot of people in California with guns. But I don't think that people on the left are specifically anti-gun. We're just pro-gun control. We want to see people owning guns and doing it in a way that is responsible. People are being accountable. And people on the right want to see it more as seeing things as being like we're going to take those guns away and this is going to be a gun-free society. That'll never happen. We're past that tipping point. There's 1.2 guns for every American. I told that to a guy who lives in Poland, who's a special force. He's in the special forces in Poland. This is a guy who's been around guns his whole life. He's like, I think it's like zero point 0.2 guns per person in Poland, and we're
um,
1.2 guns. Poland, a place that's been invaded in every single war that has ever happened. Poland's like the first place to always get
yeah,
invaded,
it's
and
not
yet,
great. A
and,
record there. The Prussian,
yeah,
yeah, the
yeah,
Euchres.
yet that they don't all live with bunch of guns in their house. Like I do believe in the right to bear arms. I believe that hunting's a great thing. I think people should be self-sufficient, and I also think that people should have the right to defend their home from home intruders and stuff. But we got to be much more meticulous about who we're allowing to do these things, because obviously we have a problem that the rest of the world doesn't seem to be having an issue with, and that is, like you said, dropping our kids off at school and worrying about whether or not they're coming home. No parent should have to go through that. I myself, just last year, my child was in a friend group, and I live in a very small town. My child's in a friend group where one of the kids said, "I'm going to come to school, and I will take care of that." And when my kid didn't like report this to me, I lost my mind. And she goes, "Well, no one's going to do that." I go, "Where do you think these types of shootings happen?" It's a predominantly white community. It's a small town. I'm like, this is where these things do happen. So, that really opened my eyes. I come from a place that has a lot of gun violence in my background, but it was never school shootings. It was always, I grew up with gangs, and so that for me was really eye opening to have moved so far up out of where I came from to then still be affected by gun violence after all of that. And the crazy thing about that is the sheriffs investigated that and they said, he doesn't seem like he's going to do anything. Um,
That's intense, John.
Yeah, yeah. And so I just think that we need to have more common sense. I think kind of one of the things we're going to get back to a lot of the times during this conversation, or come back to a lot of times during this conversation, is common sense and just saying, like, yeah, no overreaction. There's no need for exaggeration. There's no need for craziness. Let's just talk about things in a common sense manner. Let's find the middle ground that works for everybody,
Hmm.
and let's have a choice. Once again, choice. You want to own guns? Okay, be accountable, be responsible, keep them out of the hands of children. Almost all these mass shooters are taking their guns from their parents and going to school and doing these things. Lock your guns up. So um we talked a little bit about social safety nets. We talked a little bit about how you grew up and how I grew up. I benefited from food stamps. Was it called SNAP back then? I benefited from welfare growing up. My mom is disabled, and I grew up on something like $540 a month. That's what my mom made.
Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah, I have a very intense backstory. We won't get into that. We'll be here for a long time. But you're a professor by profession, correct?
I practiced in industry, and
Okay.
then I became a professor. I got a job. Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
professor right now.
Okay.
So
So, what do you think, A, about social safety net? You said 70,000 people, I believe, live below the poverty
more
line
than
in North
seven.
Dakota?
No, no, I was just saying that are on the ACA. We have over
Mm,
74,000 people that signed up for the ACA this year, I believe.
okay. And
Yeah.
so, how do you feel about social safety nets in general? What do you think you could do in North Dakota kind of make to open that access up to people that need it? And as a follow up question, how do you feel about free education?
Okay. So I think that social safety net programs like SNAP benefits are really impactful. As you've already talked about, as I've already talked about, my child, my youngest, goes to school where the free and reduced lunch population is 65%. Working poor is maybe not the right demographic description, but certainly some of them are. And just having access to that stability, breakfast and lunch is really important. It helps them be able to learn. It's so important. I think that it's also important to have those programs that allow children to access the childcare or the healthcare that they need when they're growing up, getting those vaccinations, making sure that everything's okay. I think that that's an incredible gift that we as in a society can give to future generations. And, you know, I don't know where I would be if I didn't have access to those programs. And so I know that there are millions of people because we have poverty across the country that would feel the same way. And so I think, we need to protect access to these programs. I really do feel like a lot of these people that need access, it's usually because they're in a state of crisis. And, what people need in a state of crisis is help. And that's okay. Like, that's my dad was laid off a lot for 6 years, in the 80s. It sucked. It sucked real bad. And I don't think that people like I think you get it. Like I had three siblings. My dad never made more than $25,000 a year. You do that math. Like that sucks, right? And so when people are trying to say that, oh, these people are lazy. My dad is not lazy. He worked 10-hour days when he was employed, like 5 days a week. That's hard. That's a hard life. So people don't choose that. I find that really, really condescending. And so I think it's really important that we protect those things. We have uh, to do that. Now, in terms of, I don't work for the state. I don't work for the state university system. I work for a private university. But I was really lucky when I went to college. It was very affordable, relatively speaking. And I think that we do need to do something about college affordability. You know, like my 15-year-old, he is stressed about the idea of graduating with debt, being saddled with debt. And it's just mind-boggling to me that we haven't figured out a way to make this work, particularly when the American economy is the best economy in the world, and it has been for centuries. Part of that is because of innovation. And how do we get innovation? Through education. And so, and I'm not just talking about like technical innovation. I'm banking, finance. We're very innovative people. We can find ways to make money in every sector. And so I think that is, it's not a big lift. Like we can find a way to make this work.
Yeah, and I think that when I look at free education, I look at it in this form that I'm a manager by trade. I've been in the retail industry as a manager for over 20 years.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I've ran everything from fast food. That's where I started when I was 19. I was an assistant manager at Taco Bell. To now I manage in the grocery industry. And
Congrats.
thank you. And I've had a lot of experience hiring people. And, I've hired people all the way from people that came from like the type of place I came from to people that have master's degrees, right? And it's crazy to hire somebody in a grocery store that has a master's degree. And I think that what we look at is a lot of people are pressured into this college education because that's what we've been told we're supposed to do, but also because financially you have a window where you're supported by your parents that you can take these classes. A lot of parents aren't going to let you sit around till you're 23, 24, 25 years old and then go, oh, hey, yeah, now, by then, hey, we're retired. Okay. We've moved on. We're getting our second house. And I think what I see a lot when I'm hiring people is a lot of young people that went to college between the ages of 18 and 22 that kind of come out of with a bachelor's or an associate's and they go, yeah, I didn't even really want it. I just knew it's what I was supposed to do. And now I have this debt. And what I would like to see instead is I would like to see up to 4 years of college or trade school being available to every American because it gives people the ability to both extend their period where say they want to get out of school at 18 and get a little life experience. I can tell you in my 40s, I much better now know what I wanted to do with my life than I did at 18. Well, I had a little different background, but at 18 I was a little different person, And everybody I talk to in their mid 20s goes, yeah, now I'm interested in history. Now I'm interested in education. Now I'm interested in this or that. And they have a better idea for what they want to be. And I think if you took away that stress of getting it out of the way, getting it done, and moving on with your life, you'd see a lot more people getting education that matters. And also for those people that do want to know, like the very few young kids that I've had that knew what they want to be coming out at 18, those kids not having the stress to think they have to get a job immediately out of college, get out of debt, or start working on getting out of debt. I really feel like me paying a little bit more, once again, I'm from California, a little more in taxes is not the biggest deal because when you look at how much it costs to send one kid to college, I mean, you're talking in the range of $70,000, $150,000 to send one kid to college. If I have to pay in taxes, let's say $5,000 extra a year, that's a pretty high amount, right? That I could send every kid to college in California paying $5,000 more per year. It would take me 30 years to pay in taxes what it would take for me to send one kid to college from my house. So it really is this very selfish way that we look at things. I've heard a lot from people that have gone to college that go, well, I paid for it, so you should have to. That's not what we do. As adults, we should be looking at making it easier on those that come after us. That's such a selfish way of looking at things. I don't look at my kids and go, well, I hope life sucks for them as much as it sucked for me. Like I said, I came from a really bad background. I don't want people to grow up like I did. I don't want people to experience the things I did. I experienced those things so that way my kids don't have to. In fact, I heard you say that in your ad, your Wolves ad. You said,
Yeah, my kids have
I,
no idea. They have no idea
yeah,
how poor I was. None. They've
yeah.
never seen my parents' house. It's a long story. No, I'm not kidding. I'm
No,
not
no.
kidding.
Yeah,
They they
yeah.
they have no idea. They've done.
Yeah, and so but that's the point, right? And we kind of have it ass backwards. We kind of have like this. The older generation has this idea that these kids have to go through what I went through, so that way, like we just talked about mental health. One of the biggest issues was mental health during that generation. I don't want my children to have mental health issues. I want them to grow up happy, and I want them to feel fulfilled. I want them to see a bright future that allows them to be who they want to be and accomplish what they want to accomplish. I don't want them to go, oh, I need to stress more so that way I can get tougher. That's just insanity to
Yeah,
me. So,
no, that's yeah, yeah. That's I'm gonna do some calculations. You've given me a
okay.
lot to think about there. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, I don't like I did my PhD in ag engineering, and one of the things when you go into academia and you're studying for your graduate degrees, you have to do these things called comprehensive exams. It's essential. It's like the hardest thing I've ever done. Running for Senate, yeah, it's hard, but it's not the hardest thing I've ever done. The hardest thing I've ever done is taken my comprehensive exams, which is this very traditional, like, well, I did it and it was really hard. So we are going to make it really hard on you. Like
Yeah.
your week is going to like it. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah,
Okay.
I don't like that mentality.
Well, the final big question. We're gonna get to my two favorite questions, but my final big question that I like to get into specifically when we're talking about a person like Kevin Cramer who has some very, I wouldn't even say traditional conservative. He has some quite Trumpian conservative views on some of these things. We just had Vivek come out on stage during the debates and say climate change is a hoax. I think that's hilarious that he was talking to Elon Musk not too long ago, who is whether or not people remember this or not, Elon Musk is actually a huge climate change believer. This is a weird mix that we have going on right now on the right. It's a very strange place. But Vivek came out and said climate change is a hoax. Now, Kramer has also rejected the scientific consensus on climate change. This, of course, can be a very tricky topic. But in a place that ranks third in the nation after Texas and New Mexico in oil reserves and production, balancing the necessity of the economy and the health of the planet is an extremely complicated task. I understand why people in North Dakota are very intense about the want to drill, to provide jobs, to continue to have like stable economy. Like those are very important things. So, first of all, do you accept the realities of climate change as are espoused by the greater majority of the scientific community? And if so, how would you navigate this issue if you were in the Senate for North Dakota?
So climate change is real. Like I'm not afraid to say that. I think the evidence
Excellent.
is overwhelming. Unfortunately, the realities of climate change are something we're already dealing with, like you all in California and your atmospheric rivers being so intense. Like that's a reality. Last summer in North Dakota, my son plays soccer. We couldn't go outside some days. We didn't let him go to practice because the air quality was so bad because of wildfires. So yes, it's it's here. Um, I also think that it's actually a national security issue. And so working in the Senate, that's how I would approach it. Like, how do we have a resilient response to climate change? That is the question. I think, the Inflation Reduction Act was a really great first step. We need to continue making investments in new technologies because that's kind of what we do as Americans. Like we innovate. I mean, we just hit it out of the park when it comes to new technologies, and we're proud of that. And so I think it's important that we continue to make those investments. And I see it, not addressing it is not a good idea. Addressing it as a national security risk, I feel like you can get some buy-in from skeptics. And like I said before, I think it's the way that we continue to invest in new technologies. I'm gonna talk like one of the things in industry that we were always really worried about was disruptive technologies, like something that would displace you in the marketplace. And what I see with our political leaders or elected politicians is that they really don't understand the reality of disruptive technologies. Like, look at the phone, right? Do you have a landline? No, because in 2007 there was a disruptive technology called the iPhone. Completely transformed our lives. Completely. Okay, you want to go back? I mean, we can go back to the combustion engine, right? That completely transformed our lives over 100 years ago. Before that, coal displaced wood. Like there are these things that happen. And we need to be at the forefront in those disruptive technologies rather than being behind. And so I'm a national security hawk when it comes to that sort of thing. If we don't have the best technologies, then we're not doing a very good job being leaders for our country.
And I think you brought up the poorly named Inflation Reduction Act. It was even Joe Biden said that was the worst name possible for that. It is really a green energy plan, and a lot of people on the right don't realize this, but the rest of the world is investing very heavily in green energy, including China. Like when people think of China, they think of India, they think of them as being like these, really they are the biggest producer of pollutants in the world, but behind the scenes, they are doing a lot of work for green energy not because it's good for the planet, because it's good for the economy, because they know that's where the world is going. So when you talk about like the Inflation Reduction Act, that's a really good piece of, I mean, I've been standing for Biden for the last 3 years. So, but the second part of legislation that I think is huge that I could probably do an entire podcast about, me and John Padora we almost went off the rails on this one, was the Chips and Science Act, because really at the end of the
Exactly.
day,
It's another national security risk. Oh my God.
mm-hmm.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and it works together. It works together.
Yep.
It's when you talk about innovation and what you're talking about, how we've produced all these technologies, how we're always on the forefront. Well, we used to be on the forefront of semiconductor production. TSM started here. All of these plans for semiconductors are made in America. All the best engineers are coming from America. And then they go overseas. They go to Taiwan. The production in Taiwan is really what's doing it. I mean, they have the facilities that really, pump out these high-end chips. But the Chips and Science Act is not only going to bring back 500,000 jobs, I believe, is what they're estimating that they're going to produce from this, and some odd $1 billion worth of industry. It also is going to lead to better, more affordable green energy. And when we talk about being a net producer in energy, which we became for the first time in something like 25 years under Biden, we're talking about green energy. The Super Bowl that just happened was completely 100% green energy, or renewable energy. Sorry, renewable energy. So when we talk about these types of things, I think that once again, you get down to the basis of that people are being sold fear and worry. And when you talk about job displacement, one of the things I like to say to people is, if you think that the oil industry isn't working behind the scenes already on what the next iteration of energy for the economy, which is green energy, is, then you're probably wrong. When you talk about cryptocurrency and you talk about the blockchain, right? So everybody in banking will tell you, oh no, you can't depend on the blockchain. Oh, it's people will just, they'll hack it, they'll do this, do that. The bank is working on blockchain, and they're going to come out at one point and go, hey, look, here's the blockchain we created, because they want to always be at the forefront of that industry. When oil comes out and goes, oh yeah, no, look at the EV industry, right? What was it 20 years ago? What did people say 10, 15 years ago when electric cars are on the road? No one will drive electric cars. No one likes electric cars. Oh, that's ridiculous. Everywhere you go now, electric cars. Every
I think
ad.
I think think in California probably more so than here, but yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But even the
They're
ads during the Super
definitely
Bowl.
more. Well, I mean, we there are Teslas in town, so
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, and yes, it always takes a little bit of time to get from California to the rest of the country, but these big companies, I'm speaking of California, when you talk about marijuana production and legalization of marijuana, I remember 30 years ago people talking about, what do you think Philip Morris is going to do once they legalize marijuana? Do you think Philip Morris is going to sit there and go, oh, well, I guess we're out of the industry now. Nobody wants to smoke tobacco anymore. No, they're going to get into the marijuana industry. And the same thing goes for big oil companies. The same thing goes for car production. Every one of these industries has survived as long as they have by being able to feel or get a feel for the room, understand where it's going before it gets there, and then kind of degrade and bemoan the fact that it's going there, all while working on it behind the scenes. So I think when we talk about green energy, the only reason that you even see the amount of angst and worry on that side is they just haven't gotten to the point they want to get to yet. At one point or another, they'll come out and go, "Oh no, green energy is great," and it's kind of like a little bit of 1984 or Fahrenheit 451. No one will ever remember that they ever said that it was a bad thing. They will now be like, "Oh, we've always said it was a good thing." You guys
that's a
don't
little
remember
bit
that?
frightening.
Is
Reference to
it?
Fahrenheit 411, or well, I
451,
mean,
yeah.
451.
I just
Sorry.
finished with 451, so it's got everybody should read. I just finished 1984, Brave New
There,
World,
that's what I was
Fahrenheit
mixing it up.
451.
Yeah,
Yeah,
1984. Oh God, that makes me
yeah,
upset. So,
yeah. A lot of pertinent
no, we'll
information in
see.
those books.
I think it'll be really. I mean, it's quite fascinating to see. Just honestly, I don't need a computer. I could do everything from my phone,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that just happened. What in 12 years?
yeah.
So
Look up the. It's a list of things we didn't have. I think 10 years ago, and it's
okay,
like
I
10 or
need
20
to do
years.
that. Oh, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
it's like it's insane the amount of things that you think that we had 10 years ago or 20 years. I can't remember. I think it's 10 years ago that we did not have.
Okay.
It's a gigantic list of like stuff we use every single day. But yeah, I think that, and that's a good thing. The fact that we're moving forward, but this is what I say. So a lot of people, specifically in the industry I work in, they're concerned about AI, right? Oh, AI is going to do this, it's going to do that, it's going to do this. I agree that AI must be looked at and it must be regulated, and we have to kind of feather the gas. We don't need to pump, we don't need to press the gas to the floor. But the one thing I will say is this: everybody is heading that route. So it's like a train at a train station. AI is the train and you are the passenger. So you can either get on the train and you can go with the train, or you can stand on the side of the train complaining about the train while it leaves the station. But that train's leaving, because whether America wants to do it, it doesn't matter. China's going to do it. Europe's going to do it. Someone is going to, I guarantee China's going to do it. CRISPR, gene editing, right? For how long have we talked about how, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea? What did China do? Oh, it turns out this guy, he just kind of went out on his own, and he did this with these twins. We'll put him in jail. Please, please. you know, the world is going to move forward, and we have a decision to make. Are we going to be the people that are going to be leading and regulating and making sure that this is safe? Or are we going to be the people standing on the side of the train complaining and watching it fly off a cliff? It's the reality of it. I have friends that are artists, and they hate me when I use AI art. And I tell them, learn to use AI art. Learn to get good at it. Become an engineer. Prompt. Because I'm sorry, but whether or not it absolutely sucks, there's always going to be a place for that physical art, but that's where the industry's going. Learn it. See if it's something that
People
makes
still
sense to
ride
you.
horses. And
Yeah.
we have the combustion engine, and we have the EV. So
I still read books.
it's yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I have a house full of books.
Yeah.
Oh, Jack.
He wants in.
He just he got the secret door bookcase back open. You're so smart, Jack.
If you want to take a second, you can go ahead.
No, yeah. he really, no, let's finish up. As long as
Let's
he's not
finish up.
breathing too hard. Yeah.
Okay. So here we go. We're going to ask you my two that I ask every single politician. First of all, Kevin Cramer had about $3.8 million in funding in his campaign. I think more than you last. I want to say Ballotpedia had you at. I think you were at some like 300K, and he was at like 4.1 or 3.8 million. An insane amount.
He's got more money than me.
Because
that's fair
he's
to
an
say.
incumbent, right? And
Yes.
with the parties, the way it works, if you're an incumbent, they're going to back you with every single dollar they have. I think as far as incumbents go, they win something like 80 or 85% of all re-elections, and that's one of the big reasons is the money. So obviously, there's 2 or 3 things that I talk about money and getting money out of: healthcare, the prison system, and politics. And obviously, to get it out of the other 2, you got to get it out of the third one, and that's getting money out of politics. How do you think?
He's just being okay. He's 11. He's a senior. Makes it interesting. I don't have a corgi. I have a lab, but so I think we need to get rid of the Citizens United decision. I think that was a big mistake, actually. I think it was one of the worst rulings that John Roberts had the misfortune of signing on to. My opponent, Kevin Cramer, has raised $1.5 million from PACs. That's nearly 45% of the money he's raised. I think it's important to note that in 2018, when he won this seat, outside dark money spent nearly $10 million in support of his candidacy. That's a problem. And I think that definitely influences his decisions. It's not the people's seat then, is it? And so I would, I think it's important that we have transparent campaign finance reform.
Yeah, and I think that if we're ever going to get to a place where people are actually represented by their politicians, it's going to have to be when we get money out of politics. There's no way for the everyday person to
Sorry, you can hear him, can't you? He's really, he's like getting under my chair and
okay.
mom,
Katrina,
nobody's paying attention to me.
You're a real person. You know?
He's laying down now, but he's doing the sad lay. Like, oh, I thought I'd get you. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, but seriously, okay. I mean, I would love to read the dissent. It was not Justice Breyer. Who was it before him that retired after Citizens United? I can't remember. He was a liberal justice. And the Supreme Court.
Because the Powell memo. Have you ever looked into the Powell memo?
Is this the one that won't be available for like 40 years or something like that?
No, it was leaked. It was leaked right after he became a Supreme Court justice. Oh, I have so many videos that you should watch.
Oh, well, that is the Citizen United documentation I would like to read after. I'll send you an email about that. It's from the WNYC had a podcast about it. I can't remember the name of it right now. But.
And I'll send you the video from Legia Miller on the Powell memo. That's where all of this, all Citizens United, the Chamber of Commerce, and how the Chamber of Commerce is the biggest lobbyist for big business. Why it was created in the first place to lobby for big business. Oh, yeah. Oh, God. So much to talk about there. So as far as that goes, yeah, Citizens United, I 100% agree. That's one of the biggest things, right? And my other one that I like to ask everybody, because of the fact that I think that we need to get away from this partisan politics. We need to get away from this polarized atmosphere that we live in. Is there anybody on the other side of the aisle? Can you name 2 people that you would look forward to, or one person that you would look forward to working on legislation or just reaching across the aisle and working with in the Senate?
Yes, I can. It's a really good question. I do think we need more of that. I think the most successful legislation that Congress passes is usually a bipartisan effort. Mm-hmm. So I really respect Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska. I think that she's somebody that I can respect through the decisions that she's made. And I also think that there are probably issues with Susan Collins that I can work across the aisle with. And I think that, you know, not having worked in the Senate, I really don't know how the other people work. And it's hard to know that I wouldn't be able to work with them. But just in terms of, as a person who reads the news and looks at decisions made by other senators, those are two that stand out to me that seem thoughtful and reasonable. And I really don't care about their political party if we can do the things that need to get done. Like, that's what I would like to see: progress for working people in America. We have bills to pay, families to take care of. It's insanity that elected leaders, the biggest thing that they can accomplish is passing a continuing resolution before midnight so we don't have a shutdown.
Isn't that the truth? Wow. Well, I could probably keep you here for 3 hours, I swear to God.
Well,
I
this is
really
fun.
appreciate this conversation. And that's what I'm trying
Thanks
to
for
do. I'm trying
having
to
me.
make these a little bit more fun, more enjoyable. Yeah, thank you for coming on. Why don't you tell me where people can find you, as far as donation page, all that business.
Oh yeah, campaigns are expensive. But if they want to learn more about me, they can go to Katrina, Katrina, for USSenate.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed that conversation. And if you want to see more conversations like that, check out these podcasts. Until next time, remember, get educated and get out and vote.